There's a moment recorded in the memory cores of 11,000 civilizations, burned into the cultural archives of species that had crossed the stars before humanity had learned to cross an ocean, when the galaxy went silent and looked toward a single pale blue point of light, and understood with the particular dread that only the truly powerful can inspire that the age of every other empire was over. They had watched humanity stumble into the cosmic arena like something feral and unfinished, a species that bled too easily, lived too briefly, and yet fought with a ferocity that defied every actuarial model ever built to predict the lifespan of emerging civilizations. The Keth Dominion had given humanity 40 years before extinction. The Varun Collective had offered 100. The ancient and incomprehensible Sildari had said nothing at all, because the Sildari had seen this once before, 3 billion years ago, and they alone knew what it meant when a young species refused, categorically, cosmically, stubbornly refused to die. The galaxy had placed its bets, the galaxy had lost every single one of them, and now the galaxy owed a debt that could not be paid in credits, territory, or tribute. It could only be paid in something far more painful: acknowledgement. Humanity had not merely survived the crucible of galactic civilization. Humanity had become the crucible, and everything else, every ancient empire, every star-spanning federation, every species that had looked down from the heights of 10,000-year dynasties, now had to decide whether to kneel, to resist, or to vanish into the long dark between the stars. Welcome to Beyond Impossible, the channel where humanity's most staggering achievements are not imagined, but inevitable. Tonight's story does not ask whether humanity can reach the top of the galaxy. Tonight's story asks whether humanity is ready for what waits there, and what happens when the throne you fought a millennium to claim turns out to be the most dangerous seat in the cosmos. This is the Galactic Throne. The Aegis Eternal hung in geosynchronous orbit above Kepler Station, its hull a monument to 300 years of uninterrupted human expansion, 17 kilometers of reinforced tetranium plating, gravitational lance batteries that could sterilize a moon, and a command deck that housed the single most consequential gathering of minds in the history of the Milky Way. Admiral Sira Voss stood at the center of that deck, her back straight, her hands clasped behind her, and stared at a holographic map of the galaxy that rotated slowly before her like a wound that refused to close. Every star system marked in gold belonged to humanity, or to a civilization that had formally submitted to the Terran Galactic Compact. There were 412 of them. 6 months ago, there had been 413. The Dravith hegemony had been the 413th. They were not anymore. Voss had not ordered the destruction of the Dravith home system. She had ordered a blockade, a negotiated surrender, a dignified transition of sovereignty that would have preserved their culture, their infrastructure, and the lives of the 9 billion souls distributed across their 7 inhabited worlds. The Dravith High Council had responded by detonating a chain of dark matter warheads along the edge of their own star's magnetosphere, collapsing it in a cascade that no human engineering could have arrested in time. 9 billion lives. Gone in 4 hours, not because humanity had threatened to destroy them, but because the Dravith had found the prospect of submission more unbearable than annihilation. They had chosen the void over the compact, and in doing so had sent a message that reverberated across every diplomatic channel in the known galaxy like a stone dropped into still water. Some species would rather cease to exist than accept a human galaxy. Commander Dalen Reese entered the command deck quietly, the way he always did when the news was catastrophic, as though moving softly might reduce the impact of what he carried. He was 38 years old, a xenopolitical strategist born on Titan Station, and he possessed the particular gift of being able to say devastating things in calm voices. He placed a data slate on the console beside Voss without a word. She picked it up without looking at him. The figures resolved before her eyes. 17 civilizations had gone dark in the past 90 days, not destroyed, dark. No signals, no trade vessels, no diplomatic responses. 17 species, collectively representing 40 billion sentient lives, had simply pulled the curtain closed and stopped acknowledging the compact's existence. Intelligence suggested at least 6 of them were in active communication with one another through quantum-entangled relay nodes that human cryptography had not yet cracked. Something was forming out there in the silence. Something organized, patient, and deeply afraid, which, as every strategist from Sun Tzu to the Varun war theorist Kale Das had understood, made it more dangerous than anything openly hostile. Fear, when it reached sufficient scale and found sufficient company, did not cower, it conspired. And the galaxy, Voss understood with cold clarity as the holographic stars turned slowly before her, was very, very afraid of what humanity had become. The emergency session of the Terran Galactic Compact Council convened within 6 hours of Voss's intelligence report reaching Earth. It was held not in the grand chambers of the New Geneva Accords building, where humanity's first interstellar treaties had been signed beneath vaulted ceilings of recycled lunar glass, but aboard the Aegis Eternal itself, a deliberate signal to every civilization monitoring compact communications that humanity's military and political will occupy the same room, breathed the same recycled air, and moved with the same purpose. 17 ambassadors representing humanity's closest allied species attended in person. The remaining delegations appeared as holographic projections, their forms flickering with the particular instability of signals routed through deep space quantum relays, as though even their light was reluctant to fully commit to the room. Secretary General Amara Osai spoke first, because she always did, and because in 12 years of leading the compact's civilian governance, she had developed a voice that could make existential crises sound like problems with solutions. She laid the situation out without ornamentation. 17 civilizations had entered communications blackout. Quantum intelligence suggested a coordinated resistance coalition was forming along the galaxy's outer veil, and the Dravith incident had become a rallying symbol for every species that viewed compact sovereignty as an existential threat rather than a protective framework. The room absorbed this in the particular silence of people doing very fast mathematics about very bad outcomes. Reese presented 3 response frameworks, each carrying its own civilizational weight. The first was accelerated diplomatic outreach, dispatch envoys to all 17 dark civilizations simultaneously, offer renegotiated compact terms with expanded autonomy provisions, and attempt to fracture the coalition before it solidified. The second was a demonstrative show of force along the outer veil's primary transit corridors, not an attack but a reminder, a recalibration of the coalition's risk calculations delivered in the language of gravitational lance signatures and fleet formations that could be read from 3 star systems away. The third was the option nobody wanted to name aloud, but everyone in the room had already considered: preemptive dissolution of the coalition by targeting its communication infrastructure, severing the quantum relay network before coordination could mature into mobilization. Voss rejected the third option before it finished being presented, not because it was ineffective, it would have been brutally effective, but because it was precisely the kind of action that would transform 17 frightened civilizations into 400 unified ones. Fear was already the compact's most dangerous enemy. Confirming it was justified would be a strategic catastrophe of civilizational proportions. She pushed for the first framework, reinforced by a measured naval repositioning that communicated capability without aggression. The Council voted, the motion carried. Envoy ships were dispatched within the hour, their drives burning bright against the dark as they accelerated toward the silence. The first envoy was destroyed 11 hours later. No warning. No communication, no claim of responsibility. Its quantum signature simply collapsed at the edge of the Murath system, one of the 17 dark civilizations, and the debris field that followed told the forensic teams everything they needed to know about the weapon that had been used. It was not Murath technology. It was not technology belonging to any of the 17. It was something older, something that had been dormant for a very long time and had just decided with terrible deliberateness to wake up. The weapon's signature took 47 hours to identify, and when the analysis resolved on Voss's display, the command deck of the Aegis Eternal became the quietest place in the galaxy. The forensic architecture of the energy discharge, its quantum decoherence pattern, the residual tachyon bleed, the precise way it had unraveled the envoy ship's gravitational shielding from the inside out, matched no active civilization in the compact's database. It matched one entry in the deepest archive humanity had inherited from the Soldari, filed under a classification that translated approximately as that which preceded the current order. The weapon belonged to the Velthari, a civilization so ancient that their extinction had occurred before Earth's oceans had finished cooling. Except the debris field was telling Voss with quiet, irrefutable insistence they were not extinct. They had simply been waiting, patient beyond any human conception of patience, for a reason to return to galactic affairs. And humanity, it appeared, had given them one. Reese pulled every scrap of Soldari archive data on the Velthari within the hour, and what emerged from those records was not comforting. The Velthari had not been destroyed by war, disease, or cosmic catastrophe. They had withdrawn deliberately, completely, across a timeframe measured in geological epochs, into a network of artificially stabilized pocket dimensions threaded through the galaxy's dark matter infrastructure like roots through soil. They had watched, they had evaluated, and the threshold that had finally drawn them back, according to the Soldari's characteristically oblique annotations, was the emergence of a single species' galactic hegemony. It had happened once before, 3 billion years ago. The Sildari records did not specify what the Velthari had done about it then. They did not need to. The fact that no trace of that ancient hegemony remained anywhere in the observable galaxy was annotation enough. Voss ordered an immediate restructuring of the Compact's naval deployment across the outer Vell, redistributing 3 full carrier groups into a defensive lattice designed to maximize sensor coverage while minimizing the kind of concentrated force profile that might read as provocation. It was the right tactical decision, and it failed within 18 hours. The Velthari did not engage the carrier groups. They engaged the 17 dark civilizations instead, not with weapons, but with something more sophisticated and more destabilizing. Compact intelligence intercepted fragments of the transmission, enough to reconstruct its essential content. The Velthari were offering the coalition something humanity could not counter with gravitational lances or fleet formations. They were offering them a patron, an ancient, incomprehensibly powerful patron who had dismantled hegemonies before and was prepared to do so again if the frightened civilizations of the outer Vell were willing to accept a different kind of protection than the Compact provided. Within 72 hours of that transmission, the number of dark civilizations had grown from 17 to 31. 3 Compact allied species had formally requested suspension of their membership pending review. A Velthari vessel, if vessel was even the correct term for a structure that appeared to fold space around itself rather than move through it, was detected at the edge of the Sagittarius arm, sitting motionless, radiating nothing, watching everything. And deep in the Aegis Eternal's quantum computing core, an artificial intelligence designated Oracle finished running the coalition's projected growth curve and flagged the result with the only alert classification that had never been triggered in the system's operational history. The flag reads Scifi extinction threshold probability ascending. Voss slept 4 hours in 3 days, and in that time she made the decision that every strategic model, every Oracle projection, and every voice on the Compact Council had told her was the least rational option available. She was going to talk to the Sildari, not through diplomatic channels, not through the layered translation protocols and intermediary envoys that had governed every prior human interaction with the galaxy's oldest living civilization. She was going to request a direct audience with the Sildari continuance, the governing consciousness that had existed, uninterrupted, for longer than multicellular life had existed on Earth, and she was going to do it alone, aboard a single unarmed vessel, in the full and deliberate sight of every civilization currently watching the Compact fracture. It was not a military gambit, it was a statement, written in the language of vulnerability, addressed to a galaxy that had decided humanity only understood force. Reese told her it could kill her. She told him that was considerably less catastrophic than the alternative. He accompanied her anyway, because that was who Dalen Reese was, a man constitutionally incapable of letting someone he respected walk into the unknown without someone watching their back, even if that someone could do nothing whatsoever against a consciousness 3 billion years old. The Sildari responded to the request in 11 seconds, which, given that their average diplomatic response time was measured in decades, told Voss everything she needed to know about how closely they had been monitoring events. The coordinates they transmitted led to a system with no star, a cold, dark gravitational anchor point in the galaxy's inner rim, around which 7 massive structures orbited in perfect silence, their geometries violating conventional spatial reasoning in ways that made the Aegis Eternal's navigation AI issue continuous low-level error corrections just to maintain a stable approach vector. The Sildari did not build for aesthetics, they built for duration. These structures had been here before the sun that had eventually become humanity's own had ignited from its natal cloud. What the Sildari told Voss inside that place did not take long to convey, because the Sildari had spent 3 billion years distilling complexity into precision. The Velthari were not acting out of malice. They were acting out of protocol, an ancient, self-imposed mandate activated by a specific trigger condition. That condition was not human military power. It was not human expansion, or human aggression, or any of the qualities that the frightened civilizations of the outer Vell had projected onto humanity's rise. The trigger was loneliness, specifically the particular civilizational loneliness of a species that had become so dominant it had stopped genuinely listening to anything beneath it, the isolation of the apex which the Velthari had observed across 3 billion years of cosmic history always preceded the same catastrophic endpoint. Not conquest, calcification, and then collapse. The Velthari were not trying to destroy humanity. They were trying to prevent humanity from destroying itself through the slow suffocation of unchallenged dominance and they had chosen the most brutal pedagogical method available because, in their experience, it was the only one apex species ever actually heard. Voss sat with that for a long moment in the cold silence of the starless system. Then she asked the Sildari what the previous hegemony had done when the Velthari came for them. The answer arrived not in words but in the particular quality of silence that followed, a silence that felt geological, immovable, and absolute. She understood. She opened a channel to Reese. She told him to recall the carrier groups from the outer veil, all of them, every last ship. And then she asked him to transmit, on every active frequency in the galaxy, a message containing 3 words that no dominant civilization in recorded galactic history had ever voluntarily broadcast from a position of genuine strength. The message read, "We are listening." The galaxy did not respond with relief. It responded with suspicion, which was worse because suspicion could be organized and relief could not. Within 48 hours of Voss's transmission, the Compact Council convened an emergency session for the second time in a week, and this time the room was not quiet. Admiral Cadden Moores, commander of the Compact's 2nd Expeditionary Fleet, decorated veteran of the Keth campaigns, and the single most respected military mind in human space, tendered his objection with the kind of cold, controlled fury that made junior officers instinctively step backward. Pulling the carrier groups from the outer veil was not diplomacy, he argued. It was capitulation dressed in philosophical language. It would be read by the coalition not as an invitation to dialogue, but as confirmation that the Velthari's intervention had worked, that humanity could be moved by pressure, that the Compact's resolve had a ceiling, and that ceiling had just been located. Every civilization currently on the fence between the Compact and the coalition would draw the same conclusion and draw it fast. Moores was not wrong. Voss knew he was not wrong. She let him finish, and then she asked him a single question. How many of the 31 dark civilizations had ever voluntarily rejoined a dominant powers framework after a show of force? He had no answer because the answer was 0, and they both knew it. The Velthari moved while the council argued. Their vessel, still the single structure detected, still motionless at the edge of the Sagittarius arm, emitted a pulse that Compact sensors registered as a controlled gravitational wave, precisely tuned to the resonant frequency of dark matter filaments threading through the outer veil. It was not a weapon discharge. Oracle classified it in the same breath as something far more sophisticated, a signal propagating outward through the galaxy's dark matter infrastructure at a velocity that made conventional faster-than-light communication look glacial, carrying encoded content that human cryptography unraveled over the course of 6 agonizing hours. When the translation resolved, Reese read it twice before he brought it to Voss. The Velthari were not communicating with the coalition. They were communicating with the Compact, specifically with Voss. The message acknowledged her transmission. It acknowledged the withdrawal of the carrier groups. And then it presented a condition, not a demand, not an ultimatum, but a condition in the older diplomatic sense, the way civilizations that had existed for billions of years used the word. A single prerequisite that would determine whether the Velthari stood down their patronage of the coalition or escalated it to the point where even compact military power became irrelevant as a variable. Humanity had to demonstrate, in a manner observable to every civilization currently watching, that its dominance was not the dominance of the conqueror, closed, self-referential, deaf to everything beneath it, but the dominance of the architect. It had to build something, not a weapon, not a fortress, not another monument to its own military achievement. It had to build a framework in which the civilizations it had surpassed could not merely survive but matter, could contribute to galactic governance in ways that were genuine, rather than ceremonial, structurally meaningful, rather than decoratively inclusive. And it had to do this while the coalition was still forming, while the Velthari patronage was still active, while 31 civilizations were still dark and 6 compact allies were still wavering, with no guarantee that the gesture would be received as genuine rather than tactical, and no safety net if it wasn't. Voss had 72 hours. Oracle ran the probability matrix and returned a figure she did not share with anyone except Reese, who read it, set the data slate down carefully, and said nothing for a very long time. It was in that silence that Commander Reese did the thing that defined him, not as a strategist, not as an officer, but as a human being who had spent his entire career studying alien civilizations because he genuinely, structurally, at the level of his most foundational convictions, believed they mattered. He had spent 11 years quietly, methodically building back-channel relationships with xenodiplomatic contacts across 40 civilizations. Relationships that existed entirely outside official compact protocols, maintained through personal trust rather than institutional framework, the kind of connections that bureaucracies did not create and could not replicate. He spent the next 19 hours using every single one of them, calling in every bridge he had ever built across the vast and terrified distances of the galaxy, asking each contact one question: what would make you believe us? The answers came back fragmented, painful, and achingly specific. And from them, working without sleep in a compartment off the main command deck, Reese began to draft the architecture of something that had never existed before in the Milky Way. Not a treaty, not a compact, a constitution for everyone. Reese presented the draft constitution to Voss with 11 hours remaining on the Velthari's condition window, and she read it standing up because she was too exhausted to trust herself not to fall asleep in a chair. It was 43 pages of the most precise, most ambitious, and most structurally honest political architecture she had ever encountered. A framework that did not pretend humanity was not dominant, did not construct elaborate fictions of equality that every civilization in the galaxy would immediately identify as patronizing, but instead built dominance into the document as a defined, bounded, accountable condition with explicit sunset clauses, enforceable limitations, and a galactic judicial body with genuine authority to rule against compact decisions. Staffed by representatives of every member civilization weighted by cultural longevity rather than military power. It gave the oldest civilizations the loudest voices in matters of wisdom. It gave the smallest civilizations guaranteed structural protection that could not be overridden by compact military consensus. And at its center, in language that Reese had spent 3 hours refining to a single paragraph, it defined humanity's role not as ruler but as custodian, the species that had fought its way to the top of the galaxy, and then, in full possession of everything that position offered, chosen to be accountable to the thing it governed. Voss signed it before the ink was metaphorically dry. Then she transmitted it, unencrypted, to every civilization in the galaxy simultaneously, allied, dark, wavering, and watching. The Velthari vessel responded in 4 minutes. For a consciousness operating on billion-year timescales, 4 minutes was the equivalent of a sharp intake of breath. The gravitational pulse that followed was different from the first, not a propagating signal threading through dark matter infrastructure, but a localized collapse of the spatial fold the vessel had been maintaining around itself. A slow, deliberate unfurling that compact sensors read as the Velthari equivalent of standing down. The patronage offered to the coalition was withdrawn simultaneously, confirmed by quantum relay intercepts that showed the encrypted coordination channels between the 31 dark civilizations going abruptly, completely silent, not the silence of conspiracy, but the silence of people who had just watched something unexpected happen and needed a moment to understand what it meant. Moores, standing on the command deck beside Voss as the data resolved, said nothing. He was a man who understood the weight of military victories. He was watching something heavier than that, and he was honest enough to recognize it. The 31 civilizations did not come back immediately. 6 of them took months, 3 took years. 2 required dedicated diplomatic missions staffed by Reese personally, flying unarmed into systems that had every reason to remain hostile and no institutional reason to believe a document was worth more than the fleet that could ignore it. But they came back, one by one, across the long, slow turning of subsequent years. They came back not as conquered territories processing the arithmetic of their own defeat, but as civilizations that had been offered something they had not believed a dominant species was capable of offering. The genuine possibility that their survival and their significance were not in conflict with each other. The Velthari did not join the Galactic Constitution. They did not need to. They had never needed governance. What they had needed across 3 billion years of watching hegemonies rise and calcify and collapse was evidence that this time would be different. Voss received their acknowledgement through the Soldari, transmitted in the ancient civilization's characteristic compression of meaning into minimum language. It read in full, sufficient, she had it framed. The galaxy that emerged from those events was not a human empire. It was something the galaxy had never produced before, a genuinely multi-species civilization with a dominant partner that had chosen accountability over impunity, and in doing so had achieved something more durable than conquest. Historians would later argue about whether Sira Voss had been brave or desperate in that starless Soldari system, whether Dalen Reese's constitution was genius or fortunate improvisation, whether the Velthari's intervention had been a threat or a gift disguised as one. They would argue for centuries, across 1,000 worlds, in 100 languages, in exactly the kind of living, contentious, irreducible plurality that no calcified hegemony had ever managed to sustain. Which was, in the end, precisely the point. The galactic throne had been claimed, and then in the most human act in the history of the species, it had been deliberately, irrevocably shared. There is a quality unique to humanity that no xenological survey has ever successfully quantified: No alien strategic model has ever accurately predicted, and no ancient civilization, not even the Soldari, with 3 billion years of cosmic observation logged in their incomprehensible archives, has ever fully anticipated. It is not strength, though humanity has demonstrated strength enough to shake the foundations of a galaxy. It is not intelligence, though humanity has produced minds capable of drafting constitutions in 19 sleepless hours that reshaped the political architecture of 100,000 star systems. It is not even resilience, though humanity has absorbed losses that would have permanently extinguished civilizations 10 times its age and emerged from each one more determined than before. The quality is this. Humanity has never, in the entire arc of its existence, been able to look at something larger than itself and decide that larger meant better. Every empire that rose before humanity assumed that dominance was the destination. Humanity reached dominance and asked what it was for. That question, uncomfortable, destabilizing, and profoundly inconvenient to every established order that has ever tried to manage a species asking it, is the most dangerous thing humanity has ever produced. It is also the most beautiful. It is the reason the galaxy is still here. It is the reason the throne did not become a tomb. Tonight's story was not about conquest. It was about the moment after conquest, the harder moment, the one history rarely celebrates because it generates no explosions and occupies no territory. The moment when a species in full possession of everything it fought for looks at what it holds and chooses, consciously and at great cost, to hold it differently. Ciro Voss and Dalen Reese did not save humanity by defeating its enemies. They saved humanity by refusing to become what its enemies feared it already was. That distinction is everything. That distinction is, in the truest sense, what it means to be human in a universe that keeps presenting reasons not to be. This has been the Galactic Throne, and this has been Beyond Impossible, the channel where humanity's greatest stories are not the ones where we survive the cosmos, but the ones where we prove we deserved to. If this story moved you, if it reminded you why the human spirit is the most extraordinary force this galaxy has ever produced, then you already know what to do. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and carry that feeling with you into whatever impossible thing you are facing today. The galaxy is watching. Show it what we are made of. We will see you at the next frontier.